Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of COVID Calls. Today we'll be discussing a subject close to many people's hearts, the environment. We'll be talking about climate change. And we have a very interesting panel of guests, including the Environment Minister himself, Aaron Farrugia. So I just want to introduce the rest of the guests before we get started. So as I said, firstly we have the Environment Minister Aaron Farrugia, Minister for Environment, Climate Change and Planning. Hi, Minister, can you hear me?
I am. Good afternoon, Chris.
Hi, good afternoon. And also we have two other guests. We have JP Fabri, an economist and founder of Seed, which is an advisory firm. We'll be talking a bit about how the economy can be shaped around the environment as well. And we have Andrew Schembri from Żibel, an NGO that is very much in charge of involved in cleanups and other initiatives. So we'll be talking to him as well. Andrew and JP, can you both hear me?
Yes. Hi, Chris.
Okay. All right. So let's start with you, Minister. First of all, I want to get a sense of how COVID is affecting your work at the moment. I know that you've just come out of cabinet. I know that you've been doing some big initiatives on the waste front as well. Have things slowed down at all? Has it become more complicated to deal with the environment, or are you now I don't know, more motivated than ever to shake things up a bit?
Well, not really. If anything, we have more work with COVID-19. Also because we had to adapt and basically have new legal notices to make our entities, mainly the Planning Authority, Waste Serve, but also the Environmental Watchdog, work within this context. So not really. The work is even bigger than the one we had a few weeks ago.
Are you also involved in the initiatives to keep things clean in terms of disinfecting parts of Malta, fumigation and things like that?
Not exactly. The ministry responsible is the one for the tourism industry, and the junior minister for cleansing Deodo Battista.
Okay. You announced recently a big project regarding waste management in Malta. You said it was an unprecedented investment, the biggest we've ever seen. And effectively, my understanding is that it centralizes our waste management efforts and also starts to create energy from waste, right? Is that it? Well, give us a bit of an explanation about your plans.
Very well. So we've announced the biggest ever investment in waste management here in Malta. It's going to be hundreds of millions of euro on some 82,000 square meters of land. We're going to have 4 state-of-the-art facilities with the latest technologies, all centralized in Malta North, that is Malta. And we're going to have these 4 main facilities through which we're going to move from waste to resources. With the first facility, which will be the biggest, it will be a waste to energy plant. So as the name implies, we're going to transform waste to energy, and that's the incinerator. For the very first time, we're going to have the organic waste moved to becoming compost, and therefore made useful for the agricultural sector. The third facility will be a multi-recovery facility. That is the one which will help us reach our recycling targets, therefore plastics, paper and whatnot. And the fourth and the last will be a clinical waste incinerator, which we do have one already, but the new one will be brand new with the latest technology, and therefore it will be a big upgrade. These 4 facilities will help us move from looking to waste, and now we're going to have resources out of them, and we're moving away from landfilling. So the past 100 years or so, administration after the other looked at waste as a way of landfilling, basically. So we're moving away from landfilling and now moving towards viewing waste as a resource.
But how possible is this? In the sense, obviously, landfills are not going to stop per se, right? That to some extent that's going to continue. And how much energy are we realistically going to be able to generate? Is this a tokenistic sort of symbolic gesture? Is it a significant amount?
No, as for the energy which will be created, those are figures which I don't have in hand right now. But from what the experts are telling me, it will be a lot. So it's not a token, not at all. Secondly, yes, we will make use of landfilling facilities, but we will not need the ones we planned originally. Because the moment you move from landfilling to treating waste as a resource, then yes, you will have to landfill, for example, the ashes from the incinerator, but it's something totally different from the whole thing, from the whole waste package, you know.
And so this is quite a victory for the farmers or landowners who were protesting against this government earlier this year, I believe, when the plans were announced, right?
Correct.
Are they not protesting now because they can't go out in the streets, or because your plan has managed to, you know, adapt to their concerns?
So a few months ago, way back in January, we've announced our original plans, which basically were set on some 279,000 square meters, 279,000 square meters. Since then, we've met the farmers, the residents at large at Malta, and also the local councils in Nashar and St. Paul's Bay. And basically, we went back to the drawing board with the experts. We had international experts too, and somehow we basically descaled the land needed by 1/3, by 2/3 actually, because the land needed now is 82,000 square meters. So we've moved from 279,000 square meters to 82,000 square meters. Apart from that, we're going to give back to the people, to the Maltese families, 184,000 square meters of landfilling space or facilities operated by WasteServe, which will now turn into green areas. These are 14 in Gozo, Whitfulia in Zurich, and Sant'Annin plant in Marsa Scala.
Okay.
So basically, to wet things up, we're going to have we're going to use less than 1/3 of the original plan for our four massive state-of-the-art facilities, but also giving back to the people 184,000 square meters of land in green areas.
So actual parks, we're converting places that were used for recycling into actual parks for the public, which is, I think, another point that you know, the public has always been crying out for, right? More area. I want to bring in Andrew Schembri now to get his analysis a bit as well of the hold on, to get his analysis of this waste management project as well. Andrew, you guys made a big name for yourselves in the space of cleanups, you know, so out there yourselves picking up trash from beaches, from the countryside. First of all, I imagine that work has had to stop now.
Right now, I mean, we're a bit in uncharted territory. So as it stands, even our sponsors, for example, to pull off these cleanups are in a bit of a tough situation because we can't have a dive center give us 50 diving kits, obviously, for example, for a non-profit event. So what we're trying to do right now is actually see how we can support our sponsors who have always been there for us and see how we can possibly continue the cleanups at a later stage when some of the measures are relaxed. But thank God we have a project that's been funded through the Prince of Monaco Foundation, which will be dealing with fishing nets and rogue fishing materials. So luckily for us, for this year, we can probably get by. But I think there are probably going to be other NGOs, obviously, that are not going to have the same faith as ours.
What do you make of the government's plans in terms of waste management? Was this something that you guys have been following? Are you supporting the initiative? Do you have any questions?
Yes, we're duty bound, obviously, to represent the public in this matter and be the voice with the ministry on this. So for us, it's always been in the limelight. We welcome these plans very much. I mean, especially the area being regained as green spaces. We're talking about an area that's roughly about the size of Birgu, which is significant, and it's an issue that's very current, and that's as it's very close to all our hearts, because we've been seeing land being taken here and there from around the islands. It's a huge win as well for the residents of Marsa Scala, for the residents of Gozo, of course. And what we would really like to stress at this stage is that obviously there are going to be some trade-offs when it comes to land being used and some other decisions, but this is normal on decisions of this scale and projects of this scale. You know, the waste has been an issue for us for decades. Let's be real. And we now it's important that we don't rush this implementation, and we do it, as you say, modis keep suppost, and actually take our time to get this right, because this really truly is our last chance to tackle this issue.
I want to talk a bit, and we'll bring in JP to discuss this a bit more, but I want to get both your perspectives first. A lot of people, when we talk about COVID, a lot of people say one of the benefits that we've seen so far in quite a dark time is that we're getting to witness what life could be like and what the environment could be like if humans chilled out a bit and stopped, driving everywhere and traveling everywhere and things like that. Are you quite hopeful, Andrew, about these changes and about how they will help us, tackle something like climate change in the near future, or not?
In terms of the waste management plans, it's going to put us in actual position that we may actually pull this off, and within 10 years we might have our waste under control. It gives us a fighting chance, so that's imperative. When it comes to COVID, I think if we look at it a bit realistically, all this relief is temporary, and I think what we've seen is that the Earth is a very resilient planet, and without human interaction and intervention, the Earth will continue to survive. So the matter of if the Earth needing us, it's a matter of us needing the Earth to live on. The Earth will go through extinctions and ice ages, but we need more than the Earth is providing, ultimately. So,
but you're not
for us,
then that we will adapt now and keep some of these ways.
We should. I think smart business will notice the amount of time saved, the amount of money saved, the resources saved. But obviously, I think most of us are expecting, as soon as some measures are lifted, for there to be a huge influx of people back into the environment, back into work. So you have to be realistic. You can't just expect that, when this is all over, that everything's going to go back to daisies and roses. It's a good needed break. And if you look at it from an environmental point of view, it's a long overdue break, and it's a good way to start the decade. But you can't kind of get lost in the fanfare that everything is now going to be perfect.
Too optimistic. What do you think, Minister? Do you think that you're responsible for climate change? What I find quite interesting about this whole situation is that we've known there was this massive crisis called climate change that is with us and soon to be much worse. But then when it came to a pandemic, and we did very little about that. When it came to the pandemic, the whole world organized itself in radical ways within the matter of days and weeks. And we're starting to see that maybe we can survive, without driving our cars every day, or without going to work every day and doing remote working, for example, Do you think that this will give us the impetus we need to change direction on climate change, Minister?
Well, first of all, let me clarify that the reports making the rounds are correct. That is, air pollution has subsided due to reduced traffic. Also here in Malta, I have the figures they are tangible. So air monitoring stations in Malta registered an average reduction of approximately 40% in nitrogen dioxide levels. So the figures are correct here in Malta too. As I've said in other programs, trillions of euros are needed to get the European Union on its feet. I know there is JP Fabri here with us, and I'm sure we're going to discuss the economic repercussions of COVID-19. But the question which environment ministers are asking is very straightforward. Will the COVID-19 fallout consign the bloc's climate change policies to history? That is the question everyone is asking. Is it an expensive luxury to have climate change targets nowadays, post-COVID-19? I believe that if we relaunch the economy post-COVID-19, that is, in the wrong direction, we will hit the climate change crisis wall. So as I said yesterday in Parliament, climate change is going to be a massive hurdle which we have as governments, which we need as governments to tackle. So my question is, will the European Green Deal eventually supply the jobs and economic stimulus which will convince governments to keep on track, the one which the Ursula von der Leyen's Commission preached and basically launched a few months ago? This is the question. I think we have to meet halfway. So yes, post-COVID-19, we're going to have the challenges, the financial and the economic ones, but definitely the green recovery is crucial.
JP, as we said, you're an economist. You've recently co-authored as well a book, an e-book about the challenges and opportunities of COVID-19. How are you seeing this? Do you think that we can get ourselves organized and rethink our economy in terms of the environment, or is this wishful thinking at this point?
I think I concur with what the minister said. I think now it's entirely up to us to decide what direction we want the economy to go. This COVID-19 provides us a sort of thinking space whereby we can reflect on the past and even more start planning the future. In fact, we as Seed published an ebook which is called Agile, and in it, or through this book, what we did was we consulted social partners, business leaders, and a number of consumers as well, and expert contributors. What came out very, very clear is that everyone believes that this is the time that the green revolution really takes place in Malta. And it is also coming from the business community. So I think there is this message of hope coming through, and this came through very, very, very clearly in the report, that businesses in Malta are hopeful on the recovery, but also want that this time the new economic vision is redirected with the environment at its core. So I think now it's really up to us to take the economy forward. And I'd like to touch on a point that both Andrew and the minister mentioned. I think what we're seeing from the waste side, I mean, we always knew that Malta had incredible challenges when it comes to waste. What's heartening to know is that there is now a plan and a vision on how to tackle that. And we're seeing the first steps towards what is referred to as a circular economy, whereby the waste is seen actually as a resource. So I think if we manage to take this approach, whereby we're looking at long-term plans, if we actually now transpose a long-term plan on the island's economy as well, whereby we're going to focus more on the quality of growth rather than the quantity, whereby our growth economic model is actually built on sustainability and long-term, I think the recovery can be much more beneficial for everyone.
But can we speak some specifics? So what exactly, like you said, you've got this ebook, you've consulted with many stakeholders. What exactly are you proposing in that ebook? Do you have any specific measures? Like, should we change, I don't know, the areas that we tax, for example, or our approach to tourism?
In fact, what we tackled were on two streams, right? Short-term, immediate, and then a long-term. In terms of the short-term, we mentioned a number of ideas that government can take on board in terms of tax, whereby we not only said what taxes can be deferred. I mean, the government already did a lot. There is more that some stakeholders mentioned, but we're also saying that, listen, use tax as well as an incentive towards the green economy as well. So, for example, taxing more the plastic products and these sort of things, so that the tax incentives are also used from a positive environmental point of view, if we want to go down that route. But and then I think the biggest contribution that came out is actually framing a long-term vision for the island. And in fact, one of the key enablers that came out is the importance of placing the urban environment at the core of economic strategy. And even when we're discussing with bodies like the MDA, they too felt the need that their sector also needs to embrace the green revolution to even contribute themselves through the use of environmental friendly building materials, techniques, and all of that. So I think there is this level of consciousness. But the report is there to spark a debate, to try and see exactly and address where the country or where we envision the country to go in the future.
Minister, this government and the Labour government in general has always been quite resistant of new taxes and these sort of measures. Do you think something will change now? Do you think do you see, for example, this proposal to tax single-use plastic more, or to use taxes to shape the way the public works when it comes to the environment, or are there other methods that you're looking at?
Well, first of all, we're supporting the establishment of green recovery investment, packaging, acting as accelerators, that is, of the transformation towards first climate neutrality and second health ecosystems. I don't exclude anything. What government needs right now is basically a plan to delve into green jobs and economic stimulus. And if we can do this through the green recovery, then that will be a win-win scenario for both. So I don't exclude anything. We have to look into I would say, incentives rather than taxation, because that's how the present government has always worked since 2013, giving incentives, also because of the financial surplus we had until a few weeks ago. But definitely the frame of mind and the culture which basically we had until a few weeks ago when it comes to the waste management stream, for example, has to change. And that definitely needs further incentives.
Well, what's interesting with COVID has been, sorry, I've got some issues with the sound, let me just mute some mics. What's interesting with COVID has been the way the Maltese public has embraced a lot of these very, very harsh measures, right? Obviously, okay, we're prioritizing our health, and it's an immediate gain over there. But like 3 people have died of COVID so far. Someone in the comments is telling us already 250 people have died of pollution-related issues. So our health has always been a concern, and yet we don't. For example, if we have, I don't know, a car-free day, everyone uses their car anyway. You know, with the COVID pandemic, everyone's staying home and not using their car. So what kind of incentives can you create to, for example, reduce the use of cars? Don't you have to be quite aggressive with your measures to get a change like that, a change of behavior like that done?
So first things first, irrespective of COVID-19, we have a number of targets and a number of plans which we are working on, starting with the National Air Pollution Control Program. Second, we can discuss the Malta's low or zero carbon development strategy. These are all plans which have to be introduced irrespective of COVID-19. Now, when it comes to air pollution, we can discuss a number of sectors, starting with the transportation, our industries. We can also discuss our buildings, zero carbon footprint, that is, and all that. So the strategy has to come up across a number of ministries, across a number of line ministries, which should assist in making the plan work.
Okay.
So yes, it is true that I as Minister for the Environment spearhead the way forward when it comes to these strategies, but then it will be a number of line ministries which will have to adapt and come up with a number of strategies to make them work.
Even if they're quite aggressive.
Come again?
Even if they're quite aggressive in in their approach.
Whatever works.
Okay, Andrew, what do you make of one sector that seems to be an immediate contributor to our pollution and our environment is the tourism sector, right? We're always chasing numbers and getting celebrating how many more tourists we get every month. But yet there's always this discussion around quality tourism over quantity, but that never really materializes from a cleanups and waste perspective and the kind of areas that you work in. How important, how impactful can it be to change our orientation when it comes to tourism, do you think?
Well, I think what's been very evident the past few years is that when problems aren't tackled holistically, so to give you an example, for example, with tourism, so we're aiming with every public bin in Malta, or on the whole, most public bins, for example, are general waste. So as our tourism increases, so too does our general waste from public areas. So we're missing a huge stream over there. Whatever solution gets implemented in the next 10 years, it has to be, as the Minister Farrugia is saying, adopted across multiple ministries and pushed through multiple ministries, or else at some point it's going to fall short. And we've seen projects here that have the slightest crack, everything will just come down.
Because it's so fragmented.
Exactly, and you lose people's trust as well in the project and but from a tourism point of view, with what's good is that next year we have the EU ban on single-use plastics is coming in as well. So hopefully by the end of next year or the year after, we should start seeing some real-world effects from that. In the meantime, I mean, like I said, holistically, if we look at the situation, we're still going to have a stream of plastic that's coming through the Mediterranean, and that's going to wash up on our shores. So us as an NGO, for example, are aimed at collecting that plastic that's going to wash up on our beaches, on our shores, and diverting that from landfill. Our end goal is always to divert from landfill. We know the issue.
But that's a good point, because as you're saying, if you need an inter-ministry approach to fixing a problem holistically, you need an international approach to tackle the Mediterranean Sea, for example.
That's it. I mean, we receive waste from the coast of, from South France and other parts of the Mediterranean that will pass by us with currents, and we're lumped with it. Mm-hmm. So we need to sometimes take a step back and kind of see how everything is going to interplay with each other. And I believe it also shows us how important NGOs are as well this pandemic, because, for example, you have NGOs like the food bank that on any night are serving between 30 and 40 families, and where now during the past month they've had to scale up their operations manifold. So again, it shows how an NGO like ours, for example, that's Jar Maltine and BAG and so many other good NGOs in Malta, how needed they are and how vital to the safeguarding of the environment having a functioning NGOs can be.
Okay. JP, when it comes to, I want to get your take on tourism as well, whether we should take the opportunity to invest in real quality tourism and change our approach, and whether your ebook delved into this as well. And also other industries like the construction industry. I'll ask some questions to the minister as well about planning now, but for Malta, I think that's another major contributor. No, we've got traffic, we've got tourism, we've got construction, and when it comes to something like construction, there's obviously a very big lobby group and a lot of business interest in keeping that going as fast as possible. Do you have any proposals or lines of thinking on these points?
Yes, and in the sense of lines of thinking, what really, and I'll stress this because we met people from a number of sectors, including tourism, including construction, and all of that. So this interministerial approach is definitely needed, and that is why we are grounding everything around a national vision, because that national vision will then give you the parameters for all the different streams to fall in line. And this will also have implications on individual sectors. So tourism, for example, and in the case of tourism, there are a number of other concerns that one has to keep in mind. One is the strain on the current infrastructure. So therefore, when we're looking at tourism, we also need to look at the urban mobility plans that we have, transportation plans, and all of that. But also in terms of planning. So if we're looking at the tourism numbers and the majority of the increase are going to private accommodation as opposed to collective accommodation, then even our planning considerations need to take into consideration what hotels are doing. So if hotels are increasing their bed capacity across all categories, but the increase of tourists is actually going to private accommodation due to Airbnb, then we have to keep all these factors in mind. So I think one issue that we really need to look at is the synergies across different policies and areas. And I think a case in point with Minister Farrugia's ministry, whereby the environment sits together with planning, I think that is a step definitely in the right direction. So I think we need as a country to take more of this on board, this holistic planning, and not see everything siloed, because ultimately there are always two sides to the same coin. What also came out very clearly is the need for our own current industries to transform themselves. So it is good that we continue trying to find new niches, but it will be very important to try and see that the current sectors that we currently have in Malta either increase the value in Malta, or actually they themselves start diversifying more. And this came out as well from the construction sector. Developers are entrepreneurs at the end of the day, and they do realize that their own sector will face constraints going forward. So that is why they want to see as well more regeneration efforts, more use of recycling within the industry. So I think we need to imbue our entrepreneurial class across all sectors with this innovative approach, right? How are we going to continue innovating our current industries to provide better quality? And also in terms of tourism, this was a rallying call as well. Let's not focus on the quantity, but let's focus on the quality, even the quality of the tourists that come, niche area tourism. And I think the government has made some very important strides over there in terms of quality of tourists. Why? Because we attracted some niche tourism clusters as well. So I think we are on the right track at the end of the day. It's a question of now bringing everything together and making sure that as a country we have a vision that spans more than 5 years, but we're looking at 10, 15 years. I was involved in a project in the Caribbean whereby we were looking at a vision 2050, and this was around 3-4 years ago. And when we were actually devising this vision, one of the elements that we took was actually workshops with school children. And the approach was to try and see exactly what country they dream of having in the future. And I think this, even in the area of state building and national branding, the fact that you can rally and ensure, as Andrew said, NGO collaboration with government and the private sector, I think that will bring a broad-based approach that everyone owns this vision, that it's collective.
Okay. We're running out of time, and I want to get the minister's reactions to these points as well. So ministers, we've heard, being holistic in the approach, whether it's for ministries or at a European level or at an international level, is really critical. You've, to be fair to you, I think you've been in the role for 100 days, and we've already seen more movement in waste than we've seen in many years. So the signals are positive. But how are you going to make sure that you do retain the clout you need to take certain decisions and persuade your colleagues in cabinet, the opposition, the NGOs, the business sector, the construction industry? As in, there are so many sectors to sort of manage. And I guess it falls on you to persuade people towards this vision, right? Why should the public believe in your abilities to do so?
Well, first of all, it is a big ministry. It has a number of portfolios, rightly so, a number of sectors. There are sectors which I can do on my own and tackle on my own, starting with the planning sector. We are very close to announcing now the new fuel stations policy, and we have work in progress the rural policy, and finally the SPED review, which is the strategic plan for all the environment and planning sector. Those I can do on my own. I don't need any other line ministries to assist. When it comes to climate change, yes, we need a number of line ministries, but we should basically work in a different way from what we did in the last few years. Moving away from a top-down approach and moving into a bottom-up approach. How can we do this? We need a number of stakeholders on board, especially when it comes to climate change. We need the academics on board. We need the local councils and local regions on board. We need the MCSD, that is the social partners. And finally, we need also the industry on board. That's why we need the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So together with these four stakeholders, I'm going to explain the way forward, how we're going to move towards our 2050 zero carbon targets. And with them, we decide on the way forward, which priorities we have as a country and how we're going to work in the coming months and years.
And how far back are we on our targets? There were times when it felt like these climate change targets were impossible for us to reach.
We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work.
All right, and when it comes to the Green Deal that was you mentioned it a bit yesterday as well. Can you explain what that is to the public who might not be fully aware of it?
No, basically post COVID-19, there are two options in front of us. Either discarding the European Green Deal because we will need trillions of euros to get the European Union on its feet, or the recovery will be a green one. So Malta signed the document drafted by the Danish government, and some 17 countries did join, including Malta, stating that climate change will be a big hurdle for us to surpass, and therefore the recovery should be a green one. And therefore, what we're saying is that post-COVID-19, European Green Deal should be in some way or another top of the agenda.
So just to conclude now, ultimately, do you think COVID-19 is going to be a net contributor to your efforts to fight climate change and improve the environment in Malta? Do you think it will have a negative impact, or do you think it will be neutral? Like, do you worry that when we start trying to revive the economy, suddenly you become someone much less to listen to in terms of, the environment becomes much less important, and our jobs and our income takes priority, as has happened so many times in our lifetime?
Well, if we're going to move to quick solutions, then yes, the impact will be negative on my ministry. But if, as JP rightly said, this COVID-19 situation gave us an opportunity to look further on how climate change is going to impact our healthcare systems, but also the industry at large, then yes, that would be positive, because it will be an eye-opener for everybody.
And which do you think it's going to be?
I'm an optimist, so the second.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, guys. This was a really interesting discussion. And I want to thank you all for your time and for your contribution. I'm just going to give a little conclusion in the end, and we'll sign off. So everyone, thank you very much for watching and for following and for sending us your comments as well. Today we discussed the environment and whether COVID-19 is going to help us reach our environmental targets, or is it going to set us back, as we heard from the Environment Minister Aaron Farrugia, declares himself as an optimist and is confident that things are that we are going to realize how much more holistic we need to approach these problems, and how much more seriously we need to tackle them in light of climate change. We also heard from JP Fabri, an economist who had a number of ideas about how to use taxation to reaching these advantages. And we also heard from Andrew Schembri, an activist and an NGO founder, who spoke about how important it is for us not to make the same mistakes as sometimes we've made in the past, where we fragment our response and our solutions to these problems. So that was COVID Calls about the environment. Join us tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be having two very interesting guests on the program. We have the Archbishop himself, Charles Shikluna, and we'll also have former President Mary-Louise Colero-Preca, and we'll be talking about how COVID has affected their work as well. So see you tomorrow, and thanks for following COVID Calls.